Welcome to Math Time, fourth graders. So recently we've been talking about decimals that have only been less than 1, right? Decimals where we talked about the tenths place value and decimals where we've talked about the hundredths place value. Well, today we're going to be adding in a couple of the place values greater than 1, ones that you already know, okay? So if I have the fraction 2 over 10, right? 2 over 10 could be written as 2 tenths, right? 2 tenths. But what if I add a number 1 in front of my fraction 2 tenths? Now I have the fraction 1 and 2 tenths. Okay, how can I write 1 and 2 tenths as a decimal? Well, I'm going to add a 1 in my ones place, because when I add a 1 in front of my fraction here, it's a whole number. It's a number that's going to go in the ones place if there's only one digit there. So I have the fraction 1 and 2 tenths. Similarly, now when I add the number 1 in front of my decimal here, I have 1 and 2 tenths. That decimal, that means the word and, right? 1 and 2 tenths. So when I write down my decimal here, I have 1 and 2 tenths. 1 and 2 tenths. Okay? But what if we start with the decimal this time instead of the fraction? If I have the decimal 0.35, I'm going to get these out of here in a second. I'm going to do 0.35. We know that we can read this number as 35 hundredths, right? We have 35 hundredths, just like we have 35 over 100. But what if I add that 1 right back up there in the ones place, okay? Just like I'm going to add the 1 right in front of the decimal here. 1 and 35 hundredths. How could I write that as a fraction? Well, I added the 1 in front of my decimal here. I'm just simply going to add the 1 in front of my fraction over here. So I would get 1 and 35 over 100. All right? Let's do some practice here a second. Get these down. Let's look at this decimal here. 5.62. Let's figure out how to read that one first a second. We have 5.62. Okay? We have 5.62. How do we read that? Well, we read that as 5 and 62 hundredths. Now, how do we write that one as a fraction? 5 and 62 hundredths. Well, I know that you already know that if we're just looking at the decimal here, 0.62, 62 hundredths, we just simply write that as we read it. 62 hundredths, 62 over 100. But we still have that 5 to worry about. The 5 is in front of the decimal here, just like now we're going to put the 5 in front of the fraction. 5 and 62 over 100. But what about 3 and 4 hundredths? 3 and 4 hundredths. Let's get these down here a second. We're going to do 3 and 4 hundredths. Right? Now notice I didn't put my 4 over here. I have a 0, a nice little gap with a 0 in between my decimal and my 4 because it is 3 and 4 hundredths. Okay? Now I have the fraction 3 and 4 hundredths. And we know how to write the decimal 4 hundredths, right? We do 0.04. So I'm going to put that over here. Okay? And just like we did up here, we're going to move that 3 and put it right in front of the decimal. Right? 3 and 4 hundredths. Okay? All right, let's take a look at expanded form. At the beginning of the year, we talked about expanded form, but we talked about it with place values greater than 1. Now we're going to be adding in some place values less than 1. But to review really quick, with place values greater than 1, I have the number 362 up here. So if I wanted to write expanded form of 362, I want to look at each individual place value, starting with the biggest place value and moving my way down to the smallest place value. So here I'm going to start with my 3, which is in my hundreds place. So I have 3 groups of 100, therefore 300. Now I look at my next biggest place value, which is my 6 in the tenths place value. So if I have 6 groups of tens, I have 60. 300 plus 60, I just added that 60 on. And look at my last place value here, my 2. My 2 is in my ones place value here, so I have 2 groups of 1. I just add on my 2, and I have 300 plus 60 plus 2 is my expanded form for 362. But what if we add in some place values that are less than 1? If we have 3.26, here I have my 3 in my ones place. So I just have simply 3 groups of 1, 3. Now I have my 2 in my tenths, so I'm going to add on 2 tenths to this. So I have 3 plus 0.2, or 2 tenths. And now I look at my last place value of a 6. I add on 6 hundredths. So I have my 3 plus my 2 tenths, now plus my 6 hundredths. 3 plus 2 tenths plus 6 hundredths is the expanded form for 3 and 26 hundredths. Right? But now I'm going to look at this last one here. I have 43 and 8 hundredths. So if I add my 4 here to my tenths, and I add my 0 here for my tenths, so I have 0 tenths there. Now I have 8 hundredths. All right. 43 and 8 hundredths. Again, starting with my biggest place value here, I have 4 groups of 10, or 40. I look at my 3. I have 3 groups of 1. Again, my 3 is in my ones place value there. So I have 3 groups of 1, add a 3. Now I look at my tenths place value. I have 0 tenths. If you have 0 in any of your place values, you can just skip that place value when you're working on expanded form. So I'm not even going to worry about my tenths. I'm going to go right to my hundredths. I have 8 hundredths here, which means I'm going to add on 8 hundredths. Now notice for each of these place values less than 1, I'm using decimal form here. Okay, so I have 40 plus 3 plus 8 hundredths is my expanded form for 43 and 8 hundredths. And let's finish our lesson today with comparing decimals greater than, less than, or equal to. So I know that we've already been doing that with decimals less than 1, but let's add in some decimals that are greater than 1. But first, let's practice with a couple decimals that are less than 1. So for example here, I have 47 hundredths, and I have 52 hundredths. Now remember, we can think of this one of 2 ways, either with money or with place value. If I look at this with money, I think of this as 47 cents compared to 52 cents. Well, I'm going to definitely want 52 cents before I'm going to want 47 cents. If I want to look at this with place value, I look at my biggest place value here, which is my tenths, right? So I compare my tenths, 5 tenths compared to 4 tenths. Well, I know that 5 tenths is greater than 4 tenths. 5 is bigger than 4. So I'm going to put this less than sign here. 47 hundredths is less than 52 hundredths. Okay, now let's add in some decimals that are greater than 1. So when we add in decimals that are greater than 1, just think of it as adding some dollars to our pennies here. Okay, so I have 5 and 62 hundredths compared to 3 and 79 hundredths. Think of this as $5.62 compared to $3.79. Of course, I'm going to want the $5.62, just like, but if we were to look at the place value, my 5 groups of 1 is going to be bigger than my 3 groups of 1. So of course, 5 and 62 hundredths is greater than 3 and 79 hundredths. Down here, I have 7 and 47 hundredths compared to 7 and 21 hundredths. Well, my place value here of my 7 groups of 1 is the same as my 7 groups of 1 over here. So I look at the next biggest place value, which is my tenths. I have 4 groups of 10, 4 groups of tenths, and I have 2 groups of tenths. 4 tenths is bigger than 2 tenths. Therefore, my decimal of 7 and 47 hundredths is going to be greater than my decimal of 7 and 21 hundredths. Just like $7.47 is going to be bigger than $7.21. Okay? And last but certainly not least here, I am going to take care of my 0 over here a second, because I want this to be 5 and 1/10 compared to 1 and 99 hundredths, right? If I think of this with place value, I know that my 5 in my 1's place is bigger than the 1 in the 1's place over here. So I already know that my 5.1, my 5 and 1/10 is bigger than my 1 and 99 100ths, right? But you could also think of this as $5.10 here, compared to my $1.99. Of course, $5.10 is bigger than $1.99. So 5 and 1/10 is greater than 1 and 99 hundredths. That concludes today's math lesson. There are some problems I want you to work on in your math book that are on Google Classroom. Let me know if you guys have any questions, but as always, wash your hands. See you guys.